I am not running a charity for a dying woman, my son screamed as he threw me out. Weeks later, I was digging through a dumpster for scraps when a gleaming Bentley pulled up. Mrs. Martha? It was the homeless boy I saved 20 years ago. He wept, lifted me up, and drove straight to my son's house to tear his world apart. Stick with my story until the very end and comment which city you are tuning in from. That way I can see just how far my story has traveled. My name is Martha, and I am 64 years old. I never thought my twilight years would look like this, scavenging for food in a dumpster while my own son celebrates inside the house I built with my own 2 hands. It all started 3 weeks ago when David came home from work with that look I knew all too well. It was the same look he used to get as a boy when he had done something wrong and needed to pin the blame on someone else. But this time, his words cut me deeper than any knife. "Mom, we need to talk." He sat across from me at the kitchen table, that same table where I had served him thousands of meals, where I had helped him with his algebra homework, where I had patched up his scraped knees. His wife, Brenda, was standing behind him with her arms crossed and that cold, calculated smile I never quite liked. "What is it, son?" I asked, drying my hands on the apron I was wearing. I had been preparing his favorite dinner, the same pot roast I used to make when he was little and would come running home from school starving. "Brenda and I have been talking." His voice sounded different, harder, like stone. "And we think it is time for what? That you look for another place to live." The words floated in the air for a moment, as if they were not real, as if I had not heard him correctly. "Another place?" "But son, this is my house. I raised you here. This is your home." Brenda spoke for the first time, her voice sweet but laced with venom. "But things have changed. David and I want to start a family, and we need our privacy." I felt like I had been punched right in the stomach. For years, I had worked 2 jobs to pay off this house. I had cleaned office buildings until the early hours of the morning and babysat other people's children during the day. Also, my son could have a stable home after his father abandoned us when he was barely 5 years old. "But David," I whispered, looking at my son, searching his eyes for the little boy who used to snuggle with me during thunderstorms. "I took care of you when you were sick. I worked 3 jobs to pay for your college tuition. When you didn't have the money for the engagement ring, I gave you my entire life savings." His jaw tightened. "And I'm grateful for that, Mom. But you can't live in the past anymore." "Brenda is right. We need our space. Besides," Brenda added with that fake smile plastered on her face, "at your age, you should be thinking about a place that is more appropriate. A nursing home, maybe, where you can be with people your own age." The blood froze in my veins. A nursing home? With what money? "You know my pension barely covers." "That is not our problem." David cut me off, avoiding my gaze. "You have until the weekend to find something." 3 days. He was giving me 3 days to find a place to live after this had been my sanctuary for 25 years. "David, please," I begged him, feeling the hot tears burning my eyes. "I am your mother. Where am I going to go? I have no family. I have no—" "Enough," he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "I am not going to support a dying woman. I have done enough for you. It is time you learn to fend for yourself." Dying woman. His own mother. The woman who had sacrificed everything for him, he called a dying woman. Brenda walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder, feigning compassion. "Martha, you understand, right? It is for the best." Sometimes the people you would take a bullet for are the ones behind the trigger. It is a harsh realization that hits you in the quiet of the night, knowing that the love you poured into someone has evaporated, leaving only a hollow shell of entitlement where a heart should be. That night I could not sleep. I walked through the house remembering every sacrifice, every moment of joy and pain I had lived within these walls. In David's room, where he still kept some of his high school trophies, I remembered the nights I had spent awake sewing uniforms just so I could afford to buy him the books he needed. I remembered when he was 8 years old and came down with pneumonia. The doctors said he needed expensive medicine that the insurance did not cover. I sold the only ring of value I had, an heirloom from my mother, to pay for the treatment. David recovered, but I never got that ring back. On Saturday morning, Brenda appeared in the doorway of my room with a beaming smile. "Martha, dear, we have decided to help you." She held a crumpled business card in her hands. "There is a shelter for homeless women a few blocks from here. It is not much, but it is better than nothing." A shelter. She wanted me to go to a shelter as if I were a stranger, as if I hadn't poured my blood, sweat, and tears into this house. "No," I told her with all the dignity I could muster. "I will not go to a shelter. I will find another place." But I didn't have another place. My old jobs no longer existed, my friends had drifted away over the years, and my late husband's family had never really accepted me. On Sunday morning, David put my belongings in black trash bags in the driveway. No boxes, no suitcases, trash bags. I thought, as if my whole life was refuse. "Your time is up, Mom," he told me without looking me in the eye. "Brenda already hired someone to clean your room. We need to prepare the nursery." And just like that, after 64 years of life, 25 of them in this house, I found myself on the street with everything I had left in the world stuffed into 3 garbage bags. The first few days I slept in a park, hiding from the police and from the shame. I ate what I found in the dumpsters behind restaurants, always making sure no one saw me. A part of me kept waiting for David to show up, to tell me that it had all been a terrible mistake, that his wife had manipulated him. But he didn't come. In the cold nights when the pain in my joints became unbearable, I thought about all the times David had said, "I love you, Mom," and I wondered if it had ever been real. I suppose a mother's heart is designed to break over and over again, constantly finding excuses for the children we raise. We tell ourselves they are stressed, they are busy, they are young. But staring up at the cold stars from a park bench, I ran out of excuses. The silence of his absence was louder than any apology he could have offered. This morning, after 3 weeks on the streets, I found myself rummaging through the dumpster behind the Italian restaurant where I used to take David to celebrate his birthdays. My hands were shaking as I searched for something, anything that could soothe the painful emptiness in my stomach. That was when I heard the sound of an expensive engine idling behind me. Fear paralyzed me. Was it the police? Someone who recognized me? In my desperation, I hadn't even noticed that I wasn't alone in this moment that should have been private. Humiliating. A car door closed with a soft, solid thud. Expensive. Footsteps approached slowly, as if the person coming was also processing what they were seeing. "Mrs. Martha?" That voice. I knew it, but from where? I turned slowly, still holding a piece of moldy bread in my hands, and I saw a man in a suit that probably cost more than what I used to earn in a year. But his eyes. I knew those eyes. And when he smiled at me with tears running down his cheeks, I knew my life was about to change forever. "Lucas?" I whispered, unable to believe what my eyes were seeing. The skinny, dirty kid I had met 20 years ago was now standing in front of me, dressed like a prince, with his hair perfectly styled and shoes that shone under the afternoon sun. "Mrs. Martha," he repeated, and his voice cracked. "My God, what did they do to you?" I couldn't answer. Shame burned my face, and the tears I had been holding back for weeks finally burst forth uncontrollably. Here I was, the woman who had once saved his life, scavenging for food in the trash like a starving animal. "No, no, no," he murmured, approaching quickly. "Please, don't cry." Carefully, he took the piece of bread from my hands and dropped it. "Come with me, please." "I can't," I managed to say between sobs. "I can't. I am too dirty, too—" "You saved me," he said firmly, taking my hands with such tenderness that it reminded me of the scared boy he had been. "Now it is my turn to save you." The black Bentley was more luxurious than anything I had ever seen in my life. The leather seat felt like a cloud after weeks of sleeping on park benches and damp cardboard. Lucas adjusted the air conditioning and offered me a bottle of cold water. "Drink slowly," he warned me gently, watching me with those same eyes that had once shone with gratitude when I gave him a plate of hot food. As he drove through the streets of the city, the memories came back like a movie in my mind. 20 years ago, I worked cleaning the mall at night. It was a lonely and low-paying job, but I needed the money. One night, I found a boy of about 12 years old hiding in one of the bathrooms, shivering from the cold and clearly having not eaten in days. "Where are your parents?" I had asked him. "I don't have any," he had answered with a voice that tried to be brave but couldn't hide the fear. "My mom died 2 years ago. I have been living on the streets." That night, instead of calling the authorities as I had been instructed to do, I took Lucas to my house. David was 16 years old then, and he didn't like it at all that I brought a homeless kid into our home. "Mom, are you crazy?" he had shouted at me. "That kid could have diseases. He could rob us." But I saw something in Lucas's eyes that reminded me of myself when I was little. Hunger, yes, but also a brilliant intelligence and a determination that could not be broken. For 6 months, Lucas lived with us. He slept on the living room sofa and helped with the house chores. He was polite, grateful, and had an incredibly fast mind for numbers. While David complained about having to share the food and the space, Lucas studied with used books that I bought him at garage sales. "Someday I am going to pay you back for all this, Mrs. Martha," he would tell me every night before sleeping. "I swear that when I am big, I am going to take care of you like you took care of me." Everything changed when social services finally found him. Despite my pleas, they took him away to put him in foster care. The last time I saw him, his eyes were filled with tears as he promised me he would return. "I will never forget you," he had shouted to me from the window of the social worker's car. Never, and I never forgot him either. For years, I wondered what had become of him, if he had found a good family, if he had been able to finish school. Now, sitting in his Bentley, I couldn't believe that this successful man was the same skinny boy who had cried on my sofa. "How?" I began to ask, but my voice trailed off. "How did I get here?" He smiled, although his eyes remained sad as he looked at me. "That family that adopted me, they were good people. They gave me an education, opportunities. I studied systems engineering, then an MBA. 10 years ago, I founded my own tech company. We have offices in 5 countries now." My heart swelled with pride despite my own misery. "I knew you would achieve great things. I always knew it." "It all started with you," he said softly, stopping at a traffic light. "You taught me that there was kindness in the world. You taught me that someone could care for me without expecting anything in return." We arrived at a house that looked like it came out of a magazine. It was modern, elegant, with huge windows and a perfectly manicured lawn. As Lucas opened the door, I stood motionless. "I can't go in there," I murmured, looking at my dirty clothes and feeling the grime of weeks on the street. "I'm going to get everything dirty." "This is your house now," he said firmly, "at least until we decide what to do." Inside, everything was immaculate. Leather furniture, modern art on the walls, a kitchen that looked like it was from the future. I felt like an ugly stain in the middle of so much perfection. Lucas showed me a guest room that was bigger than the living room of my old house. It had a king-size bed with sheets white as snow and a private bathroom with a tub that looked like a small swimming pool. "Take a bath," he told me gently. "There are clean clothes in the closet. Afterwards, we can talk." An hour later, clean and dressed in clothes that probably cost more than my pension for a month, I sat in the living room while Lucas prepared tea. I felt like an imposter, as if at any moment someone was going to discover that I didn't belong there. "Tell me what happened," he said, sitting across from me with 2 cups of steaming tea. "How did you end up in that situation?" For a moment, I considered lying, inventing some story that was less humiliating. But this was Lucas, the boy I had cared for like a son. He deserved the truth. I told him everything, about David and Brenda, about how I had worked my whole life to give my son a better life, only for him to toss me out like trash when he didn't need me anymore. I told him about the nights in the park, about the hunger, about the loneliness that hurt more than any physical wound. As I spoke, I saw how Lucas's expression hardened, his jaw clenched and his fists tightened. "Your own son," he muttered when I finished. "Your own son left you on the street." "Don't judge him too harshly," I said automatically, because despite everything, David was still my son. He has his own family now, his own responsibilities. "No!" Lucas stood up abruptly. "There is no excuse for this, Mrs. Martha. None." He walked to the window, looking out with his hands in his pockets. When he turned back to me, there was something in his eyes that reminded me of the successful businessman he was now, not the vulnerable boy I had known. "Tell me where your son lives," he said in a low voice. "Why?" I asked, although something in my stomach told me I already knew the answer, because it is time someone taught David what family really means. During the next 3 days, Lucas behaved like the son David never was. He prepared breakfast for me every morning, made sure I had everything I needed, and in the afternoons we sat in the garden to talk about old times. But I could see that something was eating him up inside. There was a tension in his shoulders, a distant look that appeared when he thought I wasn't watching. "Lucas," I told him one afternoon while I was watering the flowers in the garden, "I know you are planning something. I have known you since you were a child, remember?" He laughed, but it wasn't a genuine laugh. "I can't hide anything from you, can I? Tell me what you have been doing. I have seen how you check your phone when you think I am sleeping." He sat on the garden bench and sighed deeply. "I have been investigating your son and his wife." My stomach tightened. "Investigating? What do you mean?" "I have contacts, Mrs. Martha, people who can get information on anyone." His eyes hardened. "And what I found makes me sick." I put the watering can aside and sat next to him. "Tell me." Lucas took a folder out of his briefcase and placed it between us. "Did you know that David sold his house 2 months ago?" "What?" My voice came out as a whisper. "That is impossible. That house is in my name. I paid the mortgage for 25 years. "Apparently you signed a title transfer 3 years ago." He showed me some documents. "Do you remember signing this?" My hands shook as I examined the papers. My signature was there, but I didn't remember signing any transfer. "Me? I don't know." "Brenda always brought me papers to sign. She said they were for taxes, for insurance." "She tricked you," said Lucas, with a voice that dripped with cold fury. "She made you sign the transfer of your own house? Then they sold it for $350,000. I felt like I had been beaten. All that time, while I thought I was living in my own house, I was actually living in theirs. And when they didn't need me anymore, they kicked me out like I was an annoying tenant. But that is not all," Lucas continued. "Remember your savings account? The one you had at National Bank?" "Of course. I had my life savings there, about $22,000. Brenda was added as a co-owner of that account 2 years ago, apparently to help you with your finances." He showed me more documents. "They drained the account completely a month ago." My head was spinning. There is a specific kind of nausea that comes from financial betrayal, especially when the thief shares your blood. It is not just about the numbers or the security. It is the realization that while you were building a safety net for them, they were weaving a trap for you. They looked me in the eye over Sunday dinners, knowing they were erasing my future dollar by dollar. "There is more," Lucas said softly. "I spoke with some of your neighbors. David has been telling them for months that you suffer from senile dementia, that you had become dangerous to live alone. He told them they had committed you to a specialized facility." "What?" I stood up, feeling a rage I hadn't felt in years. "Dementia? I am perfectly fine, I know it, but that was their excuse to isolate you socially. That is why no one has looked for you. Everyone thinks you are being cared for in an institution." I walked through the garden, trying to process all this information. For years, I had thought that Brenda simply didn't like me. It never occurred to me that she was orchestrating my destruction so meticulously. "Lucas," I said finally, "I want to see those papers, all of them." During the next hour, we reviewed every document he had obtained: property transfers, changes in bank accounts, insurance policies where I had been removed as a beneficiary. It was like seeing the history of my own financial murder, executed slowly and carefully by the 2 people I trusted most in the world. "Look at this," said Lucas, showing me another page. "Brenda opened a savings account for Martha's future medical expenses and convinced several of your friends to donate money. She raised almost $8,000. My friends donated money for me? The tears burned my eyes. And where is that money? They spent it on a vacation to Europe last month. Here are Brenda's Instagram photos." He showed me the screen of his phone. There was Brenda, smiling at the Eiffel Tower, drinking wine in Rome, buying expensive jewelry in London. all paid for with the money my friends had donated, believing it was to take care of me. I sat heavily on the bench, feeling as if I had been hollowed out inside. All this time, I thought they just didn't want me in the house. I never imagined that. That they were robbing you systematically, Lucas finished. Mrs. Martha, this was not an impulsive decision. This was planned for years. But why? I murmured. I gave them everything. Everything I had, everything I was. Lucas put away the papers and took my hands, because they are evil people and because they thought you would never find out. That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake in Lucas's beautiful guest room, staring at the ceiling and going over all the moments when I should have seen the signs. The times Brenda insisted on helping me with my finances, the occasions when David told me it was better for him to handle my affairs because I was too old to understand complicated things. I had been so stupid, so trusting, so blind. At 3 a.m, I went down to the kitchen for a glass of water and found Lucas sitting at the dining table surrounded by more papers and speaking in a low voice on the phone. "Yes, I understand," he was saying, "but I want to know everything, every transaction, every document, every lie." He stopped when he saw me. "I'll call you later." "Can't sleep either?" I asked him. He rubbed his eyes. "I'm furious, Mrs. Martha, more furious than I have been in my life." I sat across from him. "Lucas, I don't want you to do something you might regret. The only thing I am going to regret is not having arrived sooner, not having found you before you had to scavenge for food in the trash." His voice cracked a little. "You saved my life when I was a kid. You gave me a home, love, hope, and your own son treated you worse than an animal. But getting revenge isn't going to solve anything." "This isn't revenge," he said, his eyes shining with determination. "This is justice, and justice is exactly what they are going to get." He stood up and walked to the window. "Tomorrow, we are going to pay him a visit, you and I together." "For what?" He turned to me, and in his eyes I saw the ruthless businessman who had built an empire from nothing. "To give David and Brenda the opportunity to do the right thing, to have them return your money, your house, your dignity." "And if they refuse?" A cold smile crossed his face. "Then they are going to discover that the hungry boy you once fed turned into someone who can make their lives very, very complicated." For the first time in weeks, I felt something resembling hope growing in my chest. But I also felt fear. Fear of seeing David again. Fear of facing the full truth of his betrayal. "Lucas," I said softly, "what happens if he really hates me? What happens if he never truly loved me?" He walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Then we will have learned something very important, that true family does not always share the same blood, and that sometimes the children who really matter are the ones we choose, not the ones we birthed." His words gave me more comfort than anything I had felt since this all began, but there was still a part of me that hoped, against all logic and evidence, that when I saw David tomorrow, he would run to me with tears in his eyes and ask for my forgiveness. That part of me was about to die forever. The trip to my old house felt like a funeral procession. Lucas drove in silence while I stared out the window, observing the neighborhood where I had lived for 25 years, as if it were the first time I was seeing it. Everything looked different, now that I knew the truth. The houses I had helped look after when neighbors were on trips, the yards where I had played with the neighborhood kids, the streets where I had walked thousands of times carrying groceries because I didn't have a car. "Are you ready?" Lucas asked when we pulled up in front of the house that was no longer mine. "No," I admitted, "but let's do it anyway." The house looked different too. Brenda had changed the curtains for more modern, expensive ones. She had planted new flowers in the front garden, erasing the rose bushes I had tended for decades. It was as if I was watching my life being systematically erased. Lucas rang the doorbell. I could hear music inside, laughter. It sounded like they were having a party. Brenda opened the door and her smile froze when she saw me. "Martha," she said, and I could hear the shock in her voice. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Brenda," I said, surprised by how calm my own voice sounded. "This is Lucas, an old friend of the family." Brenda's eyes quickly appraised Lucas, from his expensive suit to his designer shoes and the Bentley parked on the street. I could see her mind calculating, trying to understand who he was and what he wanted. "We need to talk to David," said Lucas politely. "He is busy right now," said Brenda, trying to close the door. "We aren't going anywhere," said Lucas, placing his hand against the door. His voice was still polite, but there was steel in it. "This is important." At that moment, I heard David's voice from inside. "Brenda, who is it?" "No one important," she yelled back. "I am your mother," I said, raising my voice enough for him to hear me. "And I need to talk to you." There was a silence, then footsteps approaching. When David appeared at the door, he looked exactly as I remembered, but there was something different in his eyes, a hardness I had never seen before. "What do you want?" he asked me without ceremony. "I want to talk to you about my house," I said, feeling my heart accelerate. "About my money. About the lies you have been telling about me." His face went pale, but he quickly composed himself. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do," said Lucas softly. "Why don't you invite us in? This should be a private conversation." David looked at Lucas with suspicion. "And who are you?" "I am Lucas Sterling," he said, extending his hand, "CEO of Sterling Technologies." I saw David's eyes widen. Even he had heard that name. Lucas's company had been in the news recently for a $100 million contract with the government. "Him? The millionaire?" Brenda murmured behind him. "Among other titles, yes," said Lucas with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Now can we come in?" They led us into the living room, my old living room, where I had spent so many nights watching TV with David when he was a boy. Brenda had changed all the furniture. The sofa where David used to snuggle with me when he had nightmares was gone. In its place was cold, modern furniture that probably had cost more than my entire life savings. "Look," said David once we sat down, "if you are coming to ask for money—" "I am not coming to ask for anything," I cut him off. "I am coming to take back what is mine." "Yours?" Brenda laughed. "Martha, you have nothing. We have been taking care of you for years, paying all your expenses." "Brenda," said Lucas calmly, taking out the folder of documents, "do you really want to continue with those lies when I have evidence of everything you have done?" The smile vanished from her face. "What evidence?" Lucas spread the documents on the coffee table. The fraudulent transfer of the house, the draining of the bank accounts, the donation money they stole. He looked directly at David. "Everything." David stood up abruptly. "That money, Mom signed those papers voluntarily." "After you told her they were for taxes and insurance," I said, feeling an anger I hadn't felt in years. "You lied to me. You manipulated me. You stole everything I had, and then you kicked me out onto the street." "No one kicked you out onto the street," screamed Brenda. "We offered you help to find a place appropriate for a person of your age." "A homeless shelter," I said. "You sent me to a shelter after stealing my house and my savings." "That house cost us a fortune in maintenance," shouted David. "The taxes, the repairs, everything." "Taxes and repairs that I paid for 25 years, I responded, "with money from 3 different jobs because I wanted to give you a better life." Lucas leaned forward. "David, do you have any idea what your mother sacrificed for you? How many dreams she abandoned? How many opportunities she lost to ensure you had everything you needed?" "That was her decision," shouted David. "No one asked her to do that." The words hit me like a slap in the face. It was the first time my son had openly admitted that he didn't value anything I had done for him. "You are right," I said softly. "It was my decision, and it was the wrong decision." Brenda and David exchanged glances. They probably expected me to continue begging, to tell them how much I loved them and beg them to let me come back. "Lucas," I said, without taking my eyes off my son, "please explain to them what is going to happen now." Lucas took out his phone. "I've been in contact with my lawyers for the last 3 days. We have evidence of financial fraud, elder abuse, and theft." He looked at Brenda. "We also have evidence that you used money donated for Martha's medical expenses on a personal vacation." Brenda's face went completely white. That was a misunderstanding." "It was not a misunderstanding," said Lucas firmly. "It was a crime." He stood up and began to pace the room. "Here are your options. You can voluntarily return everything you stole from Martha. The house, the money from the bank accounts, the donation money, plus punitive damages for the emotional suffering you caused. Or we can go to court and let a judge decide. You don't have proof of anything, said David, but his voice sounded less sure than before. Lucas smiled. David, I am the CEO of a tech company. I have access to the best private investigators in the country. I have copies of every bank transaction, every signed document, every lie you told. He paused. I also have testimonies from neighbors about the lies you told regarding Martha's mental health. Furthermore, he continued, I have the security camera footage from the shelter where you thought Martha would end up. Did you know that some of the people who work there are volunteers for my foundation? When I told them Martha's story, they were very interested in helping. Brenda collapsed into her chair. What do you want? Before Lucas could answer, I raised my hand. I want you to look me in the eyes, I said. I want you to look at me and tell me that you didn't know what you were doing was wrong. David couldn't hold my gaze. He looked at the floor, then at the wall, at anywhere except my face. You can't, I said, because you knew exactly what you were doing. You knew you were robbing me, that you were lying to me, that you were destroying me, and you did it anyway. Mom, muttered David, you don't understand. We needed... What? I cut him off. What did you need? Money for vacations in Europe? A free house? The satisfaction of humiliating the woman who sacrificed everything for you? Brenda started to cry, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage and frustration because she knew they had been caught. It's not fair, she sobbed. We took care of you for years. We gave you a roof. You gave me a roof in my own house, I screamed, and even I was surprised by the strength of my voice. After you stole my house. Lucas put a hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Martha, what do you want to happen now? I looked at my son, at the woman who had destroyed my family, at the house that was no longer mine but was still the home of my memories, and suddenly I knew exactly what I wanted. I want you to understand, I said slowly, that actions have consequences, and that today your consequences have finally arrived. During the next 2 weeks, Lucas moved like a general, coordinating a silent war. Every morning he got up early, had breakfast with me in the garden, and then disappeared into a series of meetings with lawyers, private investigators, and contacts he had accumulated over years of doing business. How is everything going? I asked him every afternoon when he returned home. Better than I expected, he would tell me, but I could see in his eyes that there was something else, something he wasn't telling me. The truth came to light one Wednesday afternoon when Lucas came home with a smile I hadn't seen since we were young. Mrs. Martha, he said, sitting with me on the terrace. Remember I told you that David worked at an accounting firm? Of course. Well, it turns out he works for Sterling and Associates. He paused, taking a sip of tea, which is one of the firms that handles the accounts for my subsidiaries. I felt a chill run down my spine. What does that mean? It means that when I called Richard Sterling to discuss some changes in our contracts, I naturally mentioned that I was helping an elderly lady who had been a victim of financial fraud by her own son, a son who, coincidentally, worked for his firm. I gasped. Lucas, what did you do? Nothing illegal, he said quickly. I only shared the facts, the documents we had collected, the evidence of fraud, all completely legal and verifiable. His smile widened. Richard is a very ethical man. He doesn't like it when his employees are involved in criminal activities, especially when those activities could affect his firm's reputation. Did David lose his job? Yesterday afternoon. Lucas pulled an envelope out of his jacket. But that is not all. Inside the envelope was an official letter from the bank where I had kept my savings for 30 years. What is this? I asked. Although my hands were shaking so much I could barely read. Brenda was arrested this morning for bank fraud and misuse of donated funds. Apparently, when the bank investigators reviewed the transactions on my account, they found a pattern of suspicious transfers that violated federal policies. The letter confirmed that they had frozen all accounts associated with Brenda and were initiating procedures to recover the stolen funds. Furthermore, they had contacted tax authorities regarding the tax implications of the unreported transfers. "Is she in jail?" I asked, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and pity. "For now. Bail is set at $50,000, and with David out of work—" He shrugged. That afternoon, while I was preparing dinner, Lucas's phone rang. He answered in the other room, but I could hear snippets of the conversation. "Yes, I understand," he was saying, "but that is not my problem. No, I am not going to consider any kind of settlement. Tell your client he should have thought about that before robbing a 64-year-old woman." When he hung up, he came into the kitchen with a serious expression. "David?" I asked. "His lawyer. Apparently they want to negotiate." "What kind of negotiation?" Lucas sat across from me. "They are willing to return half the money from your bank accounts if we drop all charges." "Half?" I felt anger burning in my chest. "Half of my own money? That is exactly what I told the lawyer." Lucas took my hands. "Mrs. Martha, you have to understand something. David and Brenda don't have the full amount. They spent most of it. The house was sold, yes, but they used that money to pay off debts they had accumulated. The vacations, the new furniture, a new car for Brenda. It's all gone." I stayed silent, processing this information. Somehow, knowing that they had thrown my money away on frivolous luxuries hurt more than knowing they had stolen it. "What do you recommend?" I asked finally. "That we proceed with the full legal proceedings. They are going to lose anyway, but at least we will set a precedent. And, He stopped as if he were hesitating whether to tell me something. "And what?" "And I bought their house." "What?" Lucas smiled. "When David and Brenda sold it, it was to a real estate investment firm. Yesterday, I bought that firm." He pulled a set of keys from his pocket. "The house is yours again, Mrs. Martha." "Legally? Completely yours." I looked at the keys shining in his palm, and I started to cry. Not tears of sadness, but tears of something I thought I would never feel again. Justice. "But there is a condition," said Lucas softly. "David and Brenda have 72 hours to get out completely. After that, if they are still there, it will be trespassing." That night, I couldn't sleep again. But this time, it wasn't from pain or fear. It was from anticipation. For the first time in months, I felt like I had control over my own life. At 2 a.m, I went down to the kitchen and found Lucas working on his laptop. "Reviewing contracts?" I asked him. "Reviewing something more interesting," he said, turning the screen toward me. "Remember the friends who donated money for your medical expenses?" "Of course. Betty, Helen, Carol, I contacted all of them. I explained to them what really happened with their donations." His smile was mischievous. "They are furious. Betty already hired a lawyer. Helen is organizing the other ladies in the neighborhood to file a class action lawsuit." "Really?" "Apparently, Brenda didn't just trick them. She also convinced the church that you needed urgent medical help and raised another $5,000 in donations." My stomach tightened. Brenda had used my name, my reputation, my story to scam not only my friends, but my entire church community. "There is something else," continued Lucas. "I knew David told Pastor Williams that you had developed aggressive dementia and that they had committed you to protect you and others." "Aggressive dementia? That is why no one looked for me when I disappeared. Everyone thought I was being cared for professionally." The enormity of his deception hit me like a wave. They hadn't just stolen my money and my house. They had meticulously destroyed my reputation and my relationships. They had turned me into a ghost in my own life. "What is going to happen now?" I asked. "Now," said Lucas, closing his laptop, "we are going to do something that should have been done a long time ago. We are going to make sure they face all the consequences of their actions." The next day, Lucas took me downtown. Our first destination was the bank, where I signed papers to officially regain control of my finances. The manager, an older man with glasses, apologized profusely for not detecting the fraudulent activities sooner. "Ma'am," he told me, "we have implemented new protocols to protect our elderly clients. What happened to you never should have occurred." Then we went to the police station, where I filed a formal statement detailing all aspects of the fraud. The detective assigned to the case, a young but experienced woman, assured me they would take the case very seriously. This type of financial elder abuse is increasing, she explained. Cases like yours help us establish precedents to protect other victims. Our last destination was the church. Pastor Williams, who had known me for 15 years, was horrified when I explained the truth. "Martha," he said, taking my hands, "I'm so sorry. If we had known—" "It is not your fault, Pastor," I told him, "but you need to know that Brenda used the church's name to collect money under false pretenses." His eyes hardened. "We are going to handle that." That afternoon, while we were returning to Lucas's house, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Martha?" It was a woman's voice that sounded familiar, but I couldn't place. "Yes, this is Carol from the neighborhood. Betty gave me your number." Her voice sounded excited. "Is it true what that young man told us about what Brenda and David did to you?" "It is true." "Oh my God. Martha, all of us thought you were in a nursing home. Brenda told us you had lost your memory and had become dangerous." "Carol," I said softly, "can you forgive me for not contacting you? I thought you didn't care anymore." "Forgive you?" she shouted. "Martha, we owe you an apology. Tomorrow afternoon we are all coming to visit you. Betty is making her peach cobbler and Helen is making lasagna, and we are all going to walk over to that house and tell Brenda exactly what we think of her." When I hung up, Lucas looked at me curiously. "Good news?" "The best news I have had in months," I said, smiling for the first time in weeks. "Turns out I have more family than I thought." But the moment I had been dreading and anticipating at the same time was still missing. The day I would have to face David and Brenda one last time, when the time came for them to leave my house. That day was only 24 hours away, and something told me it wasn't going to be easy for any of us. The day I returned to my house as its rightful owner dawned clear and cold. Lucas had insisted on accompanying me, but I knew this was something I had to do alone. I needed to face David and close this chapter of my life with my own strength. "Are you sure?" He asked me for the 10th time as he parked in front of the house. "I'm sure." And it was true. For the first time in months, I felt completely sure of what I was doing. The 72 hours were up, but David and Brenda were still there. I could see his car in the driveway and the curtains moving when they saw us arrive. Lucas had brought 2 police officers just to ensure the process was official and without conflict. I knocked on the door of my own house. David opened it and he looked terrible. He had deep circles under his eyes, hadn't shaved, and his clothes were wrinkled as if he had slept in them. "Mom," he said, and for the first time in months, his voice sounded like the boy I had known. "Please, let us explain." "The time for explanations is over," I said firmly. "You have 1 hour to gather your personal things and get out." "Where are we going to go?" he asked, and I could hear the desperation in his voice. "Brenda is still dealing with the bail. I lost my job. We don't have money." "David," I said, looking him straight in the eye, "when you kicked me out of this house, did you ask yourself where I was going to go?" He remained silent. "When you left me to scavenge for food in the trash, did you ask yourself if I had a place to sleep?" Tears started running down his cheeks. "Mom, I didn't know." "Yes, you knew." I cut him off. "You knew exactly what you were doing, and now you are going to experience what I experienced." I walked into the house. Everything looked different with the expensive furniture they had bought with my money, but the bones were the same. The walls I had painted, the floors I had polished, the windows I had cleaned thousands of times. Brenda had been released on bail that morning, apparently. She was sitting on the sofa. She was no longer the arrogant woman I had known. She looked small, scared. "Martha," she said when she saw me, "I know we made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I repeated. "Stealing $70,000 is a mistake? Kicking me out onto the street is a mistake?" "We can pay you back," she said quickly. "Little by little, we can make payments." "With what money?" I asked. "David doesn't have a job. You are going to go to jail." "With what money are you going to pay?" She fell silent. One of the police officers approached. "Ma'am, do you want us to help them gather their things?" "Give them 30 minutes, I said. "Only personal items. Everything they bought with my money stays." While they packed, I walked through the house. In my old room, they had put a crib and baby decorations. They had been planning to use my room as a nursery, completely erasing any trace that I had ever lived there. In the garage, I found boxes with my belongings, family photos, books, mementos from when David was little, everything thrown carelessly, like trash. But among the boxes, I found something that made me smile. The photo album, where I had kept every achievement of David since he was a baby. There were all the photos, his first day of school, his graduations, the day he got his first job. In every photo, I was there, smiling, proud, supporting him. When I reached his wedding photo, I stopped. I was standing off to the side, almost out of the frame, while he and Brenda posed in the center. Even then, they were already pushing me toward the margins of their life. I closed the album. I didn't need those memories anymore. When I went down, David and Brenda were at the door with their suitcases. David approached me one last time. "Mom," he said, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but—" "You are right," I said. "You don't deserve it. Is there anything I can do, any way to fix this?" I thought about his question carefully. "Do you really want to know?" He nodded desperately. "You could have come looking for me when I left. You could have called to ask if I was okay. You could have admitted you made a mistake and asked for forgiveness sincerely." I paused. "But you didn't do any of that. Instead, you told everyone I had dementia. You told the pastor I was dangerous. You let me scavenge for food in the trash while you spent my money on vacations. But now Now it is too late," I said finally. "Some things cannot be undone, David. Some wounds do not heal." He took his suitcases with trembling hands. "Are you going to be okay? Alone in this house?" "I am going to be better than I have been in years," I said with total honesty. I watched them walk away down the street carrying their suitcases, without a place to go. For a moment, I felt a twinge of pity for them, but only for a moment. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in 2 months. Lucas had insisted on staying in the guest room just to ensure I felt safe, but I knew I had nothing left to fear. During the following weeks, I slowly turned the house back into a home. I donated all the expensive furniture David and Brenda had bought and replaced them with things that were simple but comfortable. I planted new rose bushes in the garden. I painted the walls colors that I liked. My friends from the neighborhood became regular visitors. Betty came on Tuesdays to drink coffee. Helen helped me with groceries on Thursdays. Carol and I started walking together in the mornings. For the first time in years, I had a real social life. Lucas also became a constant presence. He came to dinner on Sundays and sometimes stayed to watch old movies with me. It was strange. The boy I had saved from the streets was now the man who had saved me. "Don't you miss your independent life?" I asked him one afternoon while we worked together in the garden. "Mrs. Martha," he said, planting tulips next to my roses. "You taught me that family doesn't always come from the same DNA. Sometimes it comes from the heart." 3 months later, I received a letter. The return address was from a state prison. Brenda had been sentenced to 18 months in jail for fraud and misuse of donated funds. David had been sentenced to community service and probation, but also had to pay full restitution. I didn't feel satisfaction reading the letter. I didn't feel pity either. I just felt peace. 1 year later, my life was completely different. I had started taking painting classes at the community center. Lucas had established a scholarship fund in my name to help other elderly adults who had been victims of financial abuse. I was a volunteer 2 days a week helping other people who had gone through similar situations. It was a spring afternoon when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see David standing there. He looked different, thinner, with more gray hair. But there was also something different in his eyes, something that looked like real humility. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Hello, David. Can I talk to you?" I let him in, but I didn't invite him to sit. "I have been in therapy," he began, "trying to understand how I became the kind of person who could hurt his own mother." I listened to him in silence. "Brenda and I divorced," he continued. "She blamed everyone but herself for what happened, but I knew this was my fault, my decision." "What do you want, David?" I asked. "I don't want anything," he said, and for the first time in years, I believed him. I just wanted to apologize. For real. No excuses, No conditions. What I did to you was unforgivable, and I am sorry." We stood in silence for a long moment. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "Is there any possibility," he began, "that we can be a family like before?" "No," I said firmly. "That family died the day you kicked me out of here." I watched his face fall, but I continued. "But maybe," I said slowly, "if you have really changed, if you really understand what you did, maybe in the future we can find a way to coexist." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was the only hope I could offer him. He left after that, and I remained alone in my house, in my garden, with my roses and my new memories. For the first time in my life, I was living exactly how I wanted to live. That night, while Lucas and I had dinner in the garden under the stars, I told him, "Do you know what is the strangest thing about all this?" "What?" "I'm happier now, at 65 years old, than I have been in my entire life." He smiled. "Why does that seem strange to you?" "Because I lost my son, I lost my savings, I lost my house for a while. I should be devastated." "But you didn't lose the most important thing," said Lucas. "What is that?" "Your dignity, your self-worth, your capacity to love and be loved by the right people." He was right. I had lost a son who had never really loved me, but I had gained a family of friends and a son of the heart who valued me for real. As I looked at the stars that night, I thought of all the women like me who were suffering in silence, being mistreated by the children they had raised with so much love. And I knew that my story, however painful it had been, was worth it if I could help just one person understand that it is never too late to reclaim your life. True family isn't about blood. It is about respect, unconditional love, and people who value you for who you are, not for what you can give them. And for the first time in 65 years, I had that true family.